Hey guys, my name's Nicolle Leanne with Wholistic Vitality. Today I'm going to be transcribing a recent channeling by one of my clients, which he experienced through a service that I offer called the Shamanic Journey Healing, in which case he was led into an out-of-body experience, into an astral state, to explore a particular intention or intentions for his journey. And what he got to connect to was pretty powerful in how it might relate to others on their journey, including myself. So what we're going to be talking about is kind of the topic regarding unconditional love versus our ego in our relationships. So anyways, he initially came in with the intention of wanting to connect to the quote by Lao Tzu, which is, when I let go of who I am, I become who I might be. So there was a big connection regarding the ego's influence in what he was trying to release the hold of in his personal life. And so basically, I wrote down everything from the recorded channeling. I'm going to keep him anonymous per his request, which is why I'm going to just transcribe what he connected to, which was very much experiential for him. So he was feeling everything in this particular channeling. He was experiencing it. So I probably won't be doing it justice because I'm going to be relaying the message behind it, but he was really indulging in the experience of the messages that came through and what he connected to. So first off, I'm going to describe how he was describing what he was experiencing before I go into the questions that we were asking and seeing what he was responding by virtue of what he was connecting to and how. So my client describes, once he was led into the journey, that he was seeing light beings in the form of orbs. Now, I'm not very surprised by this, as many of my clients experience this, but I also do capture video footage during many of their sessions to kind of see what's going on in the room at different points of the session, in which I do capture a lot of spirit orbs flying around the room in video form. So that's been very incredible and fascinating to watch and to see visually being demonstrated of what my clients are expressing they are connecting to. So I'm kind of seeing that in visual proof. So anyhow, so he sees the light beings in the form of orbs, and then he describes then going into himself and then sees a veil that is in his way. With my help, we kind of try to energetically clear this veil that is blocking his connection, in which after that he describes moving past the clouds and limitless universe and stars that he then opens himself up to. He says he then releases the blanket of his own deceptions, which leaves him one with everything. So he experiences his truth of being an energy light being without the trappings, as he put it. At this point is when he is contemplating losing his ego, and also contemplates at the same time his unlimited potential. And so as he's kind of contemplating that, it's more about his process of trying to really release and let go of the hold of the ego so he can connect to the all. And of course, the intention, like I mentioned with the quote, when I let go of who I am, I become who I might be. So he chooses then to shed the ego, and what he describes then is experiencing his higher truth as being unconditional love. He experiences melding with God and Source. So there's been many, I feel, ancient wisdom that's been passed on to us in many formats, in many ascended masters or teachers or gurus that really express that our higher truth is unconditional love. But how many of us actually know what that is or what that means, right? Experientially, because I think we have been very much raised in a society of conditional love. So we do not feel we are worthy or that is our truth inherently. But the higher truth is apparently that we are unconditional love in that form. So, but our human perspective, based on societal, I feel like, conditioning, we are limited to understanding that as our truth. So I go into the question to start off when he was connecting to what he described as Source or God consciousness, as he melded into that. And so he was kind of answering from that perspective. So the question was, what truth do people need to know right now? So the response he then says is, people need to learn of their true identity by letting go of their ego. And as he mentioned that, he was expressing that was what he was currently experiencing. He did mention also that he was having trouble expressing what he was feeling, but yet felt humbled by that experience. At this point, I noticed he had tears streaming down his face, in which at this point, when I asked him why was he crying or tearing up, and that was because he said he was releasing himself into the oneness and connection and how it feels so good. So that's kind of what he was expressing. We then were contemplating this experience regarding our relationships, in which the question was, how do we reconstruct our relationships without destroying the relationships that we actually have? And this question was regarding the dynamic of whether the relationship was built on faulty foundations. And if that was the case, would it be more necessary to walk away, or is it possible to reconstruct the relationship if it is on current faulty foundations? So the response that comes from this kind of questioning was knowing that all that we are and all that we know is an illusion. Letting go of our own precepts, our own truth regarding those relationships, allows for a new foundation, with or without those relationships, as we don't know how they can be rebuilt until you let go of all the constructs of that relationship and therefore then rebuild it from the ground up. He then says, you can let go of the constructs of the relationship without having to let go of the relationship itself or the person. The question is, he says, how will it be received on the other side of that relationship? And then he mentioned, but that is not our issue. Our issue is the expression of unconditional love, always, completely, in totality, without our ego being attached to the reconstruction or where we are in that process of that relationship. So I felt that was pretty insightful as far as that was concerned, is that we don't necessarily have to let go of the relationship altogether or the person that we're involved in that relationship. However, we need to start off with letting go of our idea of the constructs of what that relationship is and what it's built upon. And until we can kind of let that go is when it is possible to then perhaps rebuild a new foundation, but we won't know if that is possible until we first let go of that constructs. So of course my question then got led to, well, what if we want to receive that same unconditional love, which might be the reason why we want to deconstruct the relationship to begin with, if in this case we were not receiving it from our partner. So the answer was, there is an ego attachment to this particular question. He's like, you can't expect unconditional love. You can only give it, and then things unfold as they will as a part of that. It's a matter of being the right being, and then reality around you transforms based on the purity of your being. And you can't control other beings, but you can only be and therefore express. So yeah, we can only give unconditional love, but we cannot expect to receive it because therefore it is conditional in this case. So my question was then, well, what about incompatibility? So the response is, well, that's what you're going to find out. But what is your definition of incompatibility? So I kind of scoff at this response or this question, and I say, well, having nothing in common. I don't know, isn't that what you'd consider incompatibility? And he responds, incompatibility is a construct of the mind to a certain degree. Reinventing oneself, reconstructing oneself. There's always some degree of compatibility, but it takes two willing souls, two people who can set aside their ego to immerse themselves in each other's energies. Life can have its incompatibilities, different interests, different thoughts, different concerns. The compatibility arises with the releasing of the egos of, is it our relationship or is it my relationship? But it takes both parties, both people in the relationship, to let go of their own egos. So that's where I find we run into the problem in my case, or from my perspective, is that, you have control of your own self and what you bring to the table, but you cannot control the other person and the outcome that you want to receive from that other person. And it takes both individuals to be willing to release their egos to participate in immersing themselves, according to this response, in each other's energies. So anyways, my next question is exactly that, is what if only one of you is willing to put in the work to do so? What if only one of you is willing to work on the self in this manner and the other person wants to remain as is or unchanged? And I'm sure many of you can relate to this. So his response then, it's not a question of somebody willing, it's not a question of somebody, so it's not a question of somebody willing to stay unchanged. It is a matter if they are willing to let go of their own ego and then be there for the other people or the other person. Again, my question is, well, what if they're not? What if they are very much immersed in their ego? That is their choice, he says. Okay, so my question then is, so does it then become our choice to deconstruct the relationship or leave? Or by our choice to shift in our being to the space of unconditional love, will that be enough to shift them or the relationship in order to make that relationship work? So if we put in that work into ourselves and can find that ability to just love unconditionally, will that be enough to keep that relationship and grow it and make it work, right? So the response is, it is not a question of will it. It is more a question of, you don't know unless you try. And you don't know unless you try with all of your heart, with all of your mind, with all of your love, to shower that person with enough love that they are willing to let go of their ego and realize how much you shifted that is now allowing them to shift too. So can you be the right person for them and open up and allow the time and space for them to be the right person for you? That is the true essence of a relationship. It is the true essence of love. Can you love that person, and can they love you with the same unconditional love that you may have for your children? You need to shift your energy towards them. So moving forward, I need to let go of who I am so that I can become who I might be. So can we do that deep enough and well enough that will allow them to make those shifts? And of course, that choice is theirs, not yours. It isn't about control. It's about letting go, and in many respects about starting over. And therefore, only time will tell if what you have done is enough. And it will give you both time to understand whether this is the journey you should be on together, or a journey where you experience part of that lifetime together, and probably perhaps experience it in different ways, therefore, in the future. But you don't know until you know that you have done your part. Can you be God to them? To express God in all that you do, without ego, without attachment, with that unconditional love that you have for your children. Can you give that to them without attachment to conditional love, essentially? You need to let go of needing to receive. Of course, it's not what we want to hear, but it's the truth. And it is the truth that therefore shall set us free. So I can feel that resistance of receiving that answer, because as the answer is reiterating, it's not about control, and we need to let go of that need to receive, and therefore making it more conditional love because of our expectations to wanting to receive it from our partner the same way that we might give it in order to unconsciously or consciously expect to receive the same in return. So of course I'm like, letting go of the need to receive. But isn't that the point of relationships? That it is a two-way street? Is my question. And so he responds, yes, it is the nature of relationships. But until we can learn to live and to love unconditionally, the ability to receive might therefore be hindered. And he's like, and always know that love is reciprocal. The more love you put out there into the universe, the more it therefore comes back to you. That comes rushing and flowing and loving and joy and awe, he says. And it may not be from where you are expecting it. So there's the caveat. He's like, but what you put out there is what you get back. And if you love and live unconditionally, unconditional love will then flow to you and through you. And it becomes this circle of energy and light that is, he says. So he was describing it from his place of experiencing this, I guess, unconditional love. So the question, or my next question is, what prevents us from unconditional love expression? Because isn't it our truth, our true nature of being? His response is our ego. It's about what we give. It's not about what we receive. He says, I think for a moment of some of the people who have experienced some incredible hardships and incredible injustices, And they have come back from those experiences with love unabounded, unconditional towards those people that did them such wrong. And he says, my body tingles when I think about the consciousness of forgiveness and of unconditional love that flows through these people that are capable of love at that level. He's like, it's that shedding of the skin of what we were to become what we might be. And if we can illuminate love and light unconditionally without blockage, without interference, without attachment, can anybody resist that? Can you love their ego to death, literally? I laugh and I'm like, well, I want to love my ego to death. Yes, to love yourself to death and to love them to death. Think of yourself or ourselves as a star or as a sun. There is so much light pulsating, flowing, being through us. Can anybody resist that? I don't think so, he says. But it has to be unconditional. My question is, well, then what is the definition of unconditional? Is it just not to receive? No, he says. It is not to expect to receive. Releasing all expectations of anybody else. Being detached of our expectations of other people and what they should do for us. What they should bring to us and how they reflect our reality back onto us. Unconditional love releases all of that to be that which expresses unconditionally, to express God, to know God, to expect nothing else in return. And it is about letting go and being what we might be. And we don't need to be anything more than the pure expression of unconditional love and expect nothing in return. So me, I'm like mind blown or ego blown, because we do expect to receive in return, right? I think about when I give, even though my intentions are good, there is kind of that string attached that you kind of are hoping or wanting or expecting that other person to give back in the same way, right? Or in kind, unconditionally, but therefore you kind of think about when you're giving to that person and you're expecting it, it isn't unconditional. So when I say we do expect to receive in return, his response is we do. And we usually get a lot in return, but we are expecting something in return. Whether it is the love for your child or husband, love for your friends, parents, or siblings, we are always expecting something in return. And if we are not getting that even, because instead, say we are getting judgment or hatred or disdain, ignorance, continuing to love unconditionally is the source of unlimited joy. That will keep that cycle flowing and moving and being within us. That nothing that an ego, nothing that we are receiving back could ever experience, could ever come close to the experience of pure, unadulterated experience of letting God flow through us. And unconditional love. Releasing all judgments, releasing our attachment to our truth, to the need to be right. Then life will unfold as it is meant to unfold. My question is, well, what if there's a bunch of resentment that is then built up in the relationship? His response is, well, release the resentment. There is no such thing as resentment with unconditional love. Otherwise, it means you have given it with attachment. You want to shine brighter and brighter and brighter, he says. Understand this concept of God, that God doesn't care. When God's light shines, it is our choice to stand in that light, or whether we then stand in that shadow. But God doesn't care which you choose. But when you are shining unconditional love into any relationship, into your life, in those relationships in your life, it is not important whether or not the other person or parties or life receive that light, it is their choice to stand in that light and absorb it, or if they want to stand in the shadow instead. But what is important is that you give it unconditionally, without attachment, without receiving back, because the truth is you still just receive it. You will receive God's unconditional love in return for letting his unconditional love flow through you and express through you in all that you do, in all that you are and all that there is. That is all that makes any difference. That is the truth of our being. It is the truth of what we can become when we shed our skin and become God's greatest expression. Be healed and you will heal. Be whole and those around you will be whole. So anyways, that was the channeled transcript of what I kind of wrote down based on what he was expressing in his session. But what he described after his session is the visual that he was experiencing with the giving of this unconditional love regarding this other person and their choice to absorb it or receive it. So how he kind of described it was, if you say this person is like standing right here, okay, and you're here giving them this love, right? So you're sending them this love. It is, he was saying visually, it is their choice to receive it, meaning they can absorb it and it'll go into them. Or because they choose not to receive it, it'll go right through them. But the way the universe works and its laws is that it will still circulate right back to you anyways. So you may not send them the love and they'll send it right back. So you experience it directly through them. And that's what we need to release, is that expectation of receiving it through the person you are giving it to. But trust and know, by virtue of how the universe works, just by you sending it, you are still receiving it in that circle or that cycle, as he puts, that it'll always come back to you. And that's why he expresses that we should still give it anyways, even if we are not receiving it in the same way from that person we are giving it to. But again, the importance is that we release the expectation to receive it through that person we are sending it to, because then we fall into the trappings of our love being conditional. So I found this to be a very powerful channeling. However, it's very challenging to, I think, still embody its message, because I feel that our egos, of course, have a lot of resistance. And at least this is how I experienced my ego kind of getting in the way of this, again, the expectation part of it. Because when I put myself into those shoes of, can I just give unconditional love to my partner, you know, in our relationships or other relationships? It doesn't have to be our personal relationships. It could be, again, our children, our parents, our siblings, our family, our friends, or other people in general. You know, we have certain expectations of them, and we might even have preconceived judgments or presumptions of how we expect them to be or react to us. And so we may withhold this expression of unconditional love, again, because we want to receive it usually in return. And if we kind of anticipate that this person is probably not going to give it to us, we can maybe be a little bit stingy with what we want to give to them, because we kind of expect that we're not going to get it back, and so we withhold. So this bigger message of saying that not only is unconditional love our truest and highest truth, in being that. But until we can release the ego and shed that skin, we cannot know that as our truth, because we get in the way of that beingness and therefore the expression of that. But if we can therefore start to dismantle that ego to become that light, that unconditional love, and just be that and express that as God's highest expression, how would that shift not only you, but those around you? Because again, you wouldn't have an expectation of whether you would get anything from them or whether they chose to receive what you were trying to demonstrate or give and just be in their presence. Wow, yeah, it's pretty intense. And so I think that's going to be quite the hurdle and journey for many of us to try to release and dismantle that ego and to just express unconditional love, even if we are not necessarily receiving it from that other person that we're giving it to. But I believe, just based on how he experienced the session and how he was emoting this message, which of course I did not do it justice because I was intellectualizing the message by just delivering the message behind it. But again, the importance is the embodiment of us experiencing that truth of our beingness and how we express it. So I'll leave that with you guys, and hopefully you get something from it just as much as I did. And again, it'll be a journey to embody the truth and wisdom of what he channeled and experienced in his session. So I hope you all have a good day. Bye.